As you may know, I'm Colin Jenkins. I'm very pleased to be here with you this afternoon. It's probably a reflection of how far the Institute of Quarrying has come in the last 30-odd years, that this is completely the one end of the continuum in terms of the agenda of what we're talking about, compared to what we would have been talking about 30 years ago. There's a few women here. There should be more. That's in keeping with what we were doing 20 years ago. But certainly in terms of the agenda and the degree in which we can engage more intellectually in some of the real challenges for the whole sector, we're on a different planet. The format of the next hour is that it's your time. It's going to be your time to engage with the collective panel we have here, with a huge wealth of stakeholder representative information and views and opinions. I don't imagine all of it will be positive about us as a quarrying site, and neither should it be. And maybe there may be opinions from the floor that'll reflect the same thing, but it's basically your time. For those of you who don't know how I tend to conduct these things, if I don't get questions from the floor, I'll pick on people. So try not to catch my eye. There's a few who are already doing it, so there you go. I made a little note here. No, I'm hoping that we get a good and stimulating debate going forward, as I'm sure we should, because basically we've heard from the two speakers so far, two keynote speakers. We have three more gentlemen who I'll introduce in a second. But basically, we need to make the most of this opportunity. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping. Laura over there in the Breton top, I think they're still called, just to show I have my little fashion tip there. Laura has a microphone, a roving microphone. Would you please ensure, before you start to speak and raise your question, you wait for the microphone. And then if you said who you were and the organisation you represent, that would be fantastic. Okay? So that's the housekeeping rule. We'll try to keep this thing rolling forward. And one of the things I would like to do is, having heard from both Peter and Miles, I would like to introduce the next three speakers, or three contributors to the panel. Some of you will know, in no particular order, Peter Baker from the HSE. Some of you who were at the MPA Health and Safety Awards last week before, would have heard your thoughts and observations on the sector as a whole. I'd like to ask Peter now to introduce himself to those of you who don't know him, but also ask Peter to say what he expects to get out of this session and what he expects from us as an institute and as a group of individuals. Peter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Chief Inspector of Construction in HSE, so I deal with the whole of the construction sector as an industry, within which my division, I've got responsibility for the quarries industry as well. There's clearly a logic as to why that's in my division, but it is a relatively small part of my division. But I've been in the job since April, so I'm still on a bit of a learning curve, and the MPA conference, and today is a very good opportunity for me to get a much better sense as to where you are within industry. I'm particularly interested in where you are in terms of your leadership, in terms of health and safety and risk control, how you're focusing on key risks, that you're not focusing too much on the trivia, that you are targeting your effort and your management and leadership effort at the right sorts of things, that you're learning from each other, both within your industry sector and also others, either in the construction sector and elsewhere. And I come from a major hazards background, where a lot could be learnt from the way in which they've approached risk management. But of course, you've still got an awful lot to do. You recognise that. Your injury rates are still higher than the national average. And there's an issue around the whole issue of occupational health as well, which I know you recognise. And so I'm interested to hear how you're going to step up to that particular challenge.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think that encapsulates very well what we can expect as we go forward, as an engagement with the important inspectorate, but also in terms of what we're going to try and achieve over the next 45, 50 minutes. Alan Gibbon, we're very pleased to welcome you. Alan is from MIRO. I'm sure a lot of you have had involvement with MIRO, and even though you may not recognise it, you've probably had involvement with MIRO. Your organisation certainly have. So maybe, Alan, you could just do the same thing and give a brief introduction to yourself and what you hope to achieve.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I spent the first half of my working career in metal mining and processing in UK, Canada, South Africa. So I don't have a history degree. I'm actually on the same page as you guys. I spent the second half in MIRO. MIRO, we are research facilitators. Our role is to work with the industry partners and help shape and develop the challenge that they wish to see addressed. We then search out groups of people who are able to work with the industry to address those issues. At that point, we get buy-in from both parties. What is very important is that we don't dictate to the industry. The industry will take charge of that project. And increasingly in recent years, we have been charged with the responsibility of finding funding. And we work very, very much now with the European Union through the platforms, network they have there. And I'm pleased to report that in the last 5 or 6 years, they've woken up to the fact that if you don't mine it or you don't grow it, you have to import it. And that's focusing minds that mineral resources in Europe and the UK are very important and they should support it. So what I'm really hoping today is to get across the fact that research, collaboration in research is good for the sector. And I think you have a great vehicle through the Institute of Quarrying. And I would like to see them act as a focus for your ideas that we can talk about, discuss and shape, and hopefully address some of the excellent points that have been made this morning, this afternoon, about where the industry is and where perhaps it should do by about 2025.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure this idea of 2025 being a target date for certain behaviours will come up time and again, I hope, because it strikes me there's a lot to do. Now, any representative stakeholder group wouldn't be complete, clearly, without something called a customer. And although maybe not a direct customer of some of the aggregates we make, I'm very pleased that Oliver of Barratt Homes has joined us. So for those of you who are stuck in quarries, this is a customer. Please be kind, be nice. But Oliver, perhaps you're very welcome here. Perhaps you could outline similar issues.
Hi there, afternoon. So Oliver Novakovic, that's why I didn't say my surname. He did forewarn me, in fairness, so I should say that. I'm the Technical Innovation Director for the Barratt Group. We will deliver nigh on 18,000 units this year from 15,000. I have a simple target. Well, obviously try and maintain our houses to the regulations, whether they're for foundations or any building regulations. But one of my big targets from our chief exec is by 2020, 20% of what we deliver will be with an innovative technology, whether it's on or off-site. So that will be around 4,000 to 5,000 units, which is a lot of money. And that can be in any above and below ground. The reason being is if we're going to go to possibly delivering 25,000 homes, which we would need to do as Barratt, if we're going to deliver I always want to say the dream of 250,000 homes, but close to 250,000 homes compared to the 120. You'd need about 5 Barratts, and Barratt's currently employ 6,000 direct employees and about 60,000 subcontractors. So if you equate that out, that would be 25,000 directly land buyers, planners, a load of people employed, and 250,000 additional skilled labour. Things that we don't currently have in the market. You only have to look into the, if you like, the southeast home counties and London to know from our point of view that we're really struggling with labour and even material shortages. We've had that hit us as well with the sudden step change. So I suppose my challenge, really the reason I'm here, and thank you for inviting me, is I've seen loads of innovation above ground. I've got probably 15 trials, probably 1,000 units, and I'm using steel, concrete, every material available above ground. I've got nothing below the ground. I haven't seen any innovation. And that maybe I'm not looking hard enough, maybe I don't know enough of you. I know most people quite well, and most industries. So I suppose part of my being here today is to see what's changing. And people always think, Barratt's we build houses. You'll be shocked to know that one of our sites of 2,000 units is as big as any infrastructural project that might happen. And there's quite a lot of infrastructure that actually happens in it. We put roads and sewage, and so we're probably the biggest users of SUD systems as Barratt. I'm definitely the biggest client for the SUD producers. I know that because they come and talk to me a lot. So, okay.
Excellent. Well, that sort of really encapsulates the whole range of inputs from the stakeholders. Really, it's we need to go back now before we start this agenda in terms of throw it open to the floor, and bearing in mind that we're talking about intelligent quarrying. It's not an oxymoron, just in case some people might think it is. If you don't know what that means, maybe it is. I'm getting confused now. I think it's probably, I'd like to certainly ask the first question, if I may, and I'd like to direct this at Peter Hansford. You've talked and summarised and introduced 2025, the joint vision. We, as quarrymen, and I used to be a quarryman, and there's a lot in the room, we have a fairly inflated view of ourselves as an industry. We know we've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. We like to think we're innovative. We like to think we're on the cutting edge of everything. We like to think we're all doing CPD. But the reality is, I'd like to know what you think and what advice you could give us, the quarrying industry, in terms of getting up to speed to prepare ourselves for 2025. You talked about how we can contribute, but what do we need to do? Because I think we think we're better than we are, and I'd like to know what your view is on the specific input and role of the quarrying industry within the UK, and certainly heavy-side construction materials, and how we can contribute towards 2025.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I talk about Construction 2025 being transformation of the UK construction industry. But what is the UK construction industry? I mean, it's a massive, diverse industry. If you include architects at one end, perhaps, and structural engineers, and you go all the way through tier ones and down the supply chain and clients and material suppliers. But in order to change the industry, we've got to mobilise the whole lot. We've got to have engagement between the whole lot. And it was very interesting to hear what Oliver was saying earlier about how he's doing innovation above ground but hasn't seen it below ground. So I think what you can bring is a very significant input into the transformation agenda, because you understand your industry. Of course you do. You are innovating in your own area, but you can help the others. And I think that's the way in which we make a step change, not in silos, but in looking across the supply chain. I talked about business models. I think actually this is really significant. You know, the way in which we contract and at the moment, I think is a little bit crazy. If somebody came from a different planet and looked at what we did, I think they'd say you do what and you do why and you operate on what margins. And I have no idea what margins you operate on in the quarrying sector, but I do know what margins the tier ones operate on, and I kind of wonder why they do it. But there must be a better way. There must be a better relationship between all these players. There must be a way in which we can add value across the whole chain. I want this to be a more profitable industry. People misunderstand the ambitions in Construction 2025 when we talk about 33% reduction in cost. We're not talking about reduction in margin. How can we be? It doesn't exist. We're talking about cutting out waste, cutting out process waste, doing things in a much better and more efficient way so that we all benefit. And I think the quarrying side has a lot to offer. So that's why I say engage in the process. Don't be onlookers, but help lead the process of change to a better industry.
Okay, that's a great kicking off point for this. So just really before I throw to yourselves, anybody from the panel like to comment further on that question? Miles?
I think sort of bringing together what Peter was saying and what Oliver was saying. So in a minute, we're going to have an almighty car crash if we're not careful as a sector, because as Oliver pointed out, he's hoping to get very busy in the building houses space, and he'll have some friends in the commercial building space and the retail space who also have the same ambition. And alongside all this, there's a general uprise, gentle but uprise in construction, extensions on kitchens, new garages, new driveways, la-di-da. And it may not have escaped your attention, and we've all talked about it. Someone in a minute is going to build a very big railway, more than one actually, one above ground, one underground, which is going to use an inordinate amount of stuff. And I was looking at this the other day, but not very long, and I need to do more work on it. But I'm not entirely sure someone's gone and actually added all this up, looked at the ability of the world to supply it and gone, good Lord, there's a massive gap. So this innovation piece is fundamentally very serious for this sector, because you need to provide, or we, depending on which side of the fence I'm sitting on, we, if you like, need to provide confidence to the contractors and the client beyond that we can innovate in this space to match the capacity of the industry to supply these monstrous things that are coming down the line in a not very distant future. And I go back to the work that Colin did when we were at Agri Industries, getting the planning permission for the Barden Hill extension, which, was a 10-plus year piece of work. Now, if you started now, you wouldn't have enough holes ready quick enough to be able to do some of this stuff. Now, I have not done the maths, but it does strike me that there is a comings together of lots of exciting things, busyness, but unless we actually start thinking this through about, do you know what, this is not just about chucking a massive load of rocks in a load of holes. We need to start thinking, well, what can we do to the offer to not train crash this scenario? Let's leave you with a conversation I had with Balfour Beatty. Not the chap Simon, or his name was, I spoke to about the sea defence thing, but a guy called Paul Toyne, who was paid to think for them. And he's already thinking, this looks bad. I'm going to start ringing around people in Northern Europe and Ireland and Norway and other related places to try and find other supply routes, because I don't want to be, as we start bidding for these jobs, we don't want to start selling things we can't buy. So there is a very real need to really get on our game to start solving these problems that might occur. We cannot simply not know the answers to that question. Either there isn't a problem or there is, but I'm not confident that we know whether there is or there isn't this bottleneck or crisis of resources that's upon us. And I think in a 10-year horizon, that's quite serious, and we have something to deliver in that space.
Well, perhaps that's a good point to throw out. There are people here who are representative of mineral operators from quarrying companies. We're not. We might have, some of us might have been, but we're no longer. So how would you like to respond to that? The fact that basically you're going to cause a car crash because you're not prepared for the future? We've got several, okay. It's Robert.
Richard Bird, British Aggregates Association. I listened to what Miles said and I quite agree with him. But at the same time, I've listened to Peter Hansford, who told us that most of the government new projects all seem to be in the south. He told us it was going to be another Crossrail. We've got Hinckley. We've got a couple of runways. And he mentioned briefly the Great Northern Powerhouse. Now, those of us that live in the north don't quite know what he means. So my question is, if you want to balance it so we can get our aggregates evenly spread across the country, not forgetting we've got massive shortages of aggregates and sand in the southeast. If we want to get it and want to get our housing program up the way government wanted, isn't it about time we started to do something? Instead of having another railway line that runs from London to Birmingham, should we not have it running from Hull to Liverpool and really get some benefit and more bangs for our bucks? And as for that M6 between Manchester and Birmingham, where we've got, 14 lanes going into 3, and I travel on it very regularly. And Peter, you didn't mention the motorways. Isn't it about time we needed to spread it around a bit? That's my question.
So, sorry, as a clarification point there, Richard, are you suggesting that if we spread it around a bit, we'd be in a better position to satisfy?
I think so, yes, because if people... Everyone goes to London, and yet London's overcrowded. It's too damned expensive. People can't afford it, and so on and so on. We need to spread the wealth, if you like, throughout the country. We in the quarrying industry can do that, but we can only do that on the back of government projects. In other words, if we've got a decent infrastructure, then Barratt's will build houses where there are decent roads and decent infrastructures. That's my point, if that's clear.
Could I answer? Do you mind?
Certainly, go on,
do
Oliver.
you
Jump
mind?
in.
Do you mind, please?
No, you go first if you wish.
I hear a lot of this. So I hear quite a lot of people come to me and say, if only you, as a house builder, would. And I sit there thinking, well, wait a minute. Why don't you help me help you? I feel a bit like Jerry Maguire there, don't I? But, so I build houses all over the country. I build 18,000 of them. My friend Taylor Wimpey and Persimmon build, together we build 50,000 units, and the split is pretty even across the country. So I can understand the question, but I would say to anyone around that question is sometimes it's worth thinking about how could you help that happen, instead of anybody that waits for government, apologies, to completely change the way we've been doing things without actually helping that process of change is going to be waiting a long time. You just have to look at the Green Deal, for example, if you don't mind me using that as an example. You know, that we waited for a long time for suddenly, you know, the government to make all these changes, and industry didn't really step up. So, as you can see, I'm a bit passionate about that. I hear too many suppliers, having been one myself, and learnt those mistakes, that come to a meeting to say, if you changed, we can help you. And it's like, well, no, actually, why don't you change to help me as a customer? After you know.
Oliver, I mean, thank you for that, because that really leads in quite well to what I want to say. There's a lot in what you've just said, actually. I mean, I don't think government's going to fix its infrastructure policy to suit the needs of a particular industry. I don't think it's going to do that. I think government's looking at its infrastructure policy to suit the needs of the economy as a whole. And yes, there's a lot of work in the south. There is. But that's where they judge the need is. But having said that, there's also a lot coming to the north. The Northern Powerhouse, and okay, it might just sound like a bit of jargon, but as I understand it, the Chancellor is putting a lot of focus on what's happening in the north. We're going to hear the comprehensive spending review tomorrow. I have no crystal ball or inside information, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a lot focused on the north. High Speed 3 is exactly what you said. It's Liverpool to Manchester to Leeds to, I don't know if it goes to Hull or Newcastle or where it goes, but it's east-west, and it's going to be given a big focus along with roads and rail. And then there's something called the West Midland Combined Authority, the WMCA. I don't know how many people have heard of that, but that's giving a focus to the Midlands. So I think we're going to see more of that. But I come back to, you can't build your policy around where the aggregates happen to be, I don't think. I think it's about where the need is. I'm sure you weren't saying that. I think it's where the need is. And the final point I want to make is that Oliver's right. This government, more than the last one, this is my observation, and you've got to understand, I'm not a spokesman for government. I'm an observer like you are, but my observation is this government, even more than the last one, wants industry to step up. It doesn't want to have to take the lead on things. It sees the role of government as being to enable and support, but not to lead. And it's really looking for our industry sectors to take the lead. And I think Oliver's right. We as an industry have to step up.
I think an observation, and I get involved in all sorts of things related to logistics. And I think if the demand is genuinely in the southeast, which clearly it is when you look at the statistics, hugely disproportionate to the rest of the country in terms of consumption of aggregates, ready mix, even asphalt and other products. It's about logistics more than about where the quarry is, but clearly where the quarry is getting further and further away from London, as we know, because of sterilisation and denudation. Fact. Now, maybe it's true to say that as representative of the quarrying industry, we feel somewhat ill-prepared to be lobbying somebody to protect river wharfs, to protect seaborne locations for landing aggregates, to protect railheads, because there's a lot less railheads and river wharfs than there used to be. Now, that is a strategic issue, and I know we have protected wharfs on the Thames, But there are some nice railheads being taken out of circulation at the moment by house development, mixed use, whatever. And I'm not sure it's one of your developments I'm thinking of. I'll talk to you later about it. So maybe, that's when I think the much vaunted industrial strategy the government have started to talk about, perhaps, given what you just said, probably won't fit particularly well politically with their view of a laissez-faire approach to a demand economy. But we feel fairly, I think, we feel fairly remote from the fact that it's all about logistics when you talk about moving materials in bulk to the southeast. Fair or unfair? What do you think about that, Richard? Is that fair about logistics and railheads and ships?
I hear what you say, and I'm glad I've got you going on it because, we're in the quarrying industry. We need infrastructure to get our products to market. If we didn't have the roads, we wouldn't be able to supply barrets. So the roads have to come first. If our stuff has to go a long way, then we need decent roads to take them, or we put them on the trains, or we put them on the boats. That's my point, that we need an infrastructure to help develop not just the quarrying industry, but I think the whole national thing, about houses and stuff like that. Because a lot of our aggregates are in the north, and it's in Scotland. A lot of stuff comes from Glensander, comes down the coast into, the southeast. Great, but it's still got to get from Kent into London, into Greater London and places like that. So my point really is government, our government really, and I take what Peter says, I agree with you. We are getting the first signs of somebody actually taking it on board and not saying we don't want any more roads or we don't want this. I'm delighted, as one that lives in Scotland, I'm delighted they're going to build a runway or even 2 runways so I can hop on a plane from Edinburgh or Glasgow and go to Glasgow, and go to Gatwick or Heathrow. I mean, the difference that makes to people in the north so that they can commute to London is tremendous. And if Boris Johnson doesn't know that, well, I suggest he gets up there and starts looking. But I've said enough. Thank you. Thank you.
On that, okay.
Pick up on a point you made.
Sorry, could you just introduce yourself?
Sorry, Steve Cole
Yeah.
from Raymond Brown, independent quarrying. Just a quick point on what you said about railheads and infrastructure. That's a major concern of the aggregate working parties with the encroachment of housing and development on those sort of facilities and what they're going to do. But I wanted to pick up on what Miles said in terms of the train crash and the 10-year scenario. We're now trying to get a quarry extension down in Dorset. We're 7 years been waiting for a mineral sites plan to be developed. It's another 2 years in the publishing. Our sand quarry and other quarries of that ilk are now doing twice the production we were doing 2 years ago because of the uplift in housing, and the reserves are just disappearing out the door quicker than we can replace them. At present, I don't think planning policy is working, so that's another message that needs to go back to government. I don't know what the panel think about that.
I think we're straying into mineral products and BAA areas at the moment, aren't we? But it is true, and it fits with this whole strategy for the UK. Would anybody like to comment on mineral planning specifically, or?
Can I ask a question of the mineral industry?
Please, yeah, question for the industry.
Just curious, do aggregates go into roads?
Yes.
Do aggregates go into roads? Yeah. So if you want more roads,
50,000 tonnes for every mile of motorway.
so if you want to build more roads, what have you done to innovate to allow us to build more roads more cost effectively?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
That's probably the problem.
No, well, if I may, I don't know, are there any pavement experts here? Asphalt pavement experts? If you look at the trends for asphalt, Oliver, which clearly is the pretty much main ingredient, although we've gone to semi-flexible pavements now, pavements, the consumption of asphalt in this country is about half what it was in 88, okay? Now, clearly we're post-new motorway, but actually, when you look at pavement thickness, which is where the material goes, I think it's probably about half what it used to be. So basically, we used to have them, that thick, yeah, partly, with planned obsolescence in it, and now we've designed out a lot of that, and we have 40-year life pavements using a lot less aggregate. Now, if you're an aggregate supplier that thinks that's not very good for business, yeah, and if you're an asphalt supplier, you think it's not very good for business, but we've done it. Why? Because we know the roads all need maintaining anyway, and they're worse condition now than they would have been, not because of the 40-year design life issue. So, we've still got this pent-up demand. So, yes, we've done quite a lot. I think the issue is how much of that was driven by bitumen suppliers, how much of concrete innovation has been driven by cement suppliers versus how much has been driven by aggregates manufacturers. That's an interesting question. Yes. And I think if you ask that question, I'm not sure how many people here have ever been involved in R&D on aggregates. Anybody? Anybody know what their companies and organisations are doing on research and development for aggregates? That's the answer. Not pavements, not ready mix, not bricks, etc. A quick question over here. Tony.
Tony Stark, University of Derby. I work in the mineral products team. There's a little stand about us over here. Do come and check out what's going on. We are in the position of being a supplier to you because we train people, we educate people. We're entering a new era, and you're going to hear about that a little bit later on when Mark, our leader, introduces all the new members of staff that we've got. So we've got some exciting things going on in the future. Now, in the spirit of Miles' talk, know your clients. So we want to do industry-based research. We've been doing industry-based teaching for a lot of years, and I understand we're quite good at it because you keep sending us students, so thank you very much indeed. We now want to take the next step. We want to do some industry-based research, specifically focusing on the Mineral Products Centre. So my question to members of the panel, and perhaps to some other people in the room, and if you haven't got time, please put your answer on the piece of paper on our table. My question is, for each member of the panel, can you please tell me what your view is with regard to the key strategic issue that is preventing progress within the industry, so that folks like me and the rest of the team at the University of Derby can do a little bit of research and try and unlock some of those issues.
Alan, could I ask if are you able to, or capable, or willing to comment on that? Working for one of the largest research organisations for the sector.
This sector, in common with the global minerals sector, is conservative, and it does what it does, and it does it well. It has a viable market, and it services that market. To try, in the current climate, to get people to look over the horizon when the accountants now who look after what we do are very keen that profits are made and good returns are made in the short term, it is very difficult, and we in MIRO find it very difficult, to engage with people such that they are prepared to invest in the longer term. And it is trying to get the longer term perspective out there, which is what, in my view, challenges our ability to do good R&D. And I don't, that's not unique to this sector. It is the world as we see it now.
So I think there's a very important lesson to take away on the research and development side and the innovation side, bearing in mind they were some of the key planks as well as competence. Perhaps I can slightly switch. Sorry, is it related to this specific topic? Well, no, we'll go now then. I was going to switch tack slightly to health and safety for a second, but.
Peter Haddock, Filling News. But Oliver, so it's probably a question for you really as the customer, and getting to know the customer a bit better is a good point for this. But we in the plant sector and the quarrying industry really need to understand how we can help you meet some of your sustainability targets and carbon emission targets. There isn't any set procedures or set ways in which the industry is coming together on that. And I think that's a real driver for innovation, because if we can bring that to the table, but obviously if we understand what that means to you and its importance to your end customers and how they perceive that. We saw the E4 home earlier, for example. How do you think we can actually come together and create a meaningful sustainability and carbon measurement solution within the industry that we can all sign up for as a collective?
Yeah. As a company, I know we've brought a lot of high carbon content people together. So you, as you can imagine, bricks and the sort of high carbon areas, steel, people like that. And we've started getting involved in, I think it's a sustainability school or something like that, which is bringing learning from main contractors and ourselves. I think part of the role we have is trying to get some of our suppliers together and highlighting to them what our drivers are around carbon and our customers' drivers. We do quite a lot of customer research. So I think we had 50 of our suppliers together in a room like this, and we talked about how they could work with each other to reduce carbon. So the window manufacturers are learning from the brick manufacturers, so there's that cross transfer of knowledge. I think we're important in that, you know, because as the top level client, whilst we could just sit back and say, here's the target, help us, which is sort of an old school way of doing it, I think what we're trying to do is actually be part of that journey with them, and also understand that in many of those instances we have to change. So we've changed our specifications and things like that. I don't know if that answers your question. But that's the sort of journey.
I think for me it's also understanding how we can go from the quarry face to the delivery of those carbon targets. So how do we measure we measure our extraction processes, our carbon emissions from fuel burn and from the productivity levels, right the way through the aggregates on the road that actually get to the end. And I think there's a disconnect between that. A lot of people are talking about sustainability, but I don't believe that the industry is really looking at the A to Z transition, and obviously then the cycle that you've mentioned earlier, which is recycling that whole process.
That's all cradle to grave stuff.
I thought, yeah, I'm going to say, Miles, it rings a bell on carbon footprinting here of products.
Yeah. So there are. Yeah, there are methods about how this can be done, but your point's well made. So I talked about those environmental product declarations, and behind that are a bunch of rules about how you measure this stuff. There are, in Europe, because it's a European scheme, something like 2,000 of those certificates. When I was at Agri Industries, I distinctly remember having 18,000 products in the building materials range. So that goes to show how many product declarations are currently missing from the world of building, generally speaking. So the measurement of carbon and indeed other impacts, because there are many to the environment, is such a minority sport in construction at the moment. It's not difficult to understand why we're all sort of grasping at fog, but the methods are there. They're just not used. And I've been involved in quite a lot of conversations at the other end of the supply chain, actually at the client end, going, God, I wish there was a way of doing this. And you think everyone's looking at each other, and think, well, there is. So there is a need for people to pick up the stuff that exists, engage with the agenda, and frankly give it a crack of the whip, because there'll be many generations of effort that's required to move to a better place wherever that's decided to be. But it's like the elephant eating stuff. Unless you kind of start, we all kind of start, it's difficult to move anywhere at all. But without doubt, there is the intellectual property, if you like, exists. The conversation seems to go on, but the actual amount of activity in that space is really very limited, to be honest.
Sounds like another opportunity for further collaboration through the supply chain and across various client groups.
No, absolutely. But like I said in what I was saying before, it's about stepping up and showing some leadership. So there are a lot of people sitting on their hands going, well, when people start asking, I'll start doing it. But I think, this is one area of innovation amongst many. I mean, there's no reason to just start now. Absolutely no reason, to not start right now. It's not even difficult. It just needs a bit of enthusiasm and show a bit of leadership.
Yes, sorry, Peter. Yes.
I mean, just to add to this, and Oliver's mentioned it, and in fact Miles mentioned it in his presentation earlier, I'm really interested in the work that the Supply Chain Sustainability School is doing. I mean, the Supply Chain Sustainability School has come from some Tier 1 contractors, largely. Skanska, Costain, who else is in there? But, Langer, yeah. So they've been the drivers, but they're not the only players in there. There are organisations across the supply chain. I'm not aware of the quarrying industry being part of that. It might be. Well, Oliver says it's not. But perhaps it should be. Because I think
I'm aware, I should say,
yeah,
from what I could see on the
I'm
list.
not aware that it is. But that is a great collaboration of led by tier ones because they've got real targets on this stuff, but they can't do it alone. They really can't do it alone.
I think the lesson I'm picking up here, for us lot, let's say we're quarrying, yeah? I know a lot of us do other things as well. But at the heart of hearts, we know that digging stuff out of the ground is where it starts. Reusing stuff that's already been dug out of the ground once is where it starts. We are less influential in our companies or organisations or as consultants than perhaps we should be or used to be. And we're allowing other parts of the organisations we're all part of, whether they're big or small, to drive the agenda. And maybe because the key is, and this is an issue for the Institute of Quarrying, we have not been proactive enough in pushing the agenda, whatever that agenda is, whether it's collaboration, innovation, whatever, for aggregates per se. We've allowed other people to do what they have to do, often using our materials. So those of you who are training to be in the industry, those of you who are in the industry, those of you coming to the end of your time in the industry, it's probably that we're less important now than we used to be, and it goes back to my point right at the beginning. We're probably nowhere near as important as we think we are.
The issue of sustainability and carbon targets, I just draw your attention to an EU project that's just been completed, which had the glorious title of EE Quarry. And what it tried to do was to model the energy input for each stage of the process. That is from planning to use. And surprisingly, the biggest energy related factor was if you don't do the planning right, if you don't get the quarry right in the first place, because those inefficiencies continue throughout the whole life of the quarry. We were supposed to produce an overarching model. I'm not really convinced that that actually worked that well, but the individual parts, it was very, very useful. And out of that came another little project that we've just completed, which was looking at modelling crushing and grinding. And we worked with a company in the UK, and we managed, they were doing fine grinding, admittedly, but we managed to reduce their energy input in crushing and grinding by nearly 10%, which is a huge amount. And that project now is actually being transferred back to the sector which I come from, the metal sector. And historically, I'm more used to seeing technology being transferred the other way. So there are opportunities and there are things we can do. It takes vision and it takes faith and money.
Okay, I'm keen to move on now, possibly to a slightly different area, although it's clearly related to the fact that we're hearing we haven't got the right people, enough people, never mind it being in the right place. Those of you who are involved in leading health and safety in your organisations, either as operational managers or maybe as consultants, Darren, perhaps you'd like to consider asking a question so we can bring Peter Baker into this conversation.
So Darren Broadhead, really interesting discussion. We've heard about leadership and its importance. We've heard about skills. We've heard about industry stepping up to meet our customers' needs and really supporting them, facilitating them to be successful. What's going through my mind is I'm wondering, do we actually have the leadership skill set to be successful? I don't know when we've talked about skills, where we're talking about people who operate plant or people who run the quarry day to day. So my thinking has gone to, when we go to skills, we're not talking about those important roles maybe on the ground. I'm thinking about leadership. And the context I'm thinking about it is that there's a 2025 plan of which the quarrying sector will deliver its proportion and its contribution to success. So maybe my question for the panel was, what are their thoughts on, and I guess asking you about the adequacy of leadership was probably a bit unfair, maybe asking you around success stories you've seen in other sectors maybe, more broadly in construction. What is allowing their leadership groups to be successful? And is it transparent that they're delivering their part of the 2025 objective?
Peter, would you kick off on that one in terms of your exposure to leadership generally in industry and then focusing in on our construction and our sector, please?
Yes. It's probably better doing it that way around, given sort of limited exposure I've had of your industry. But coming back from the major hazard onshore chemicals business, which I was immersed in for 6 years, they had a seminal moment with Buncefield, large explosion in the southeast. and industry decided that this sort of thing cannot go on. One thing that industry wasn't doing very well was learning from incidents, accidents that had occurred across the world, and also learning from each other, both within their own chemical industry, but also learning from examples across the piece in other industries where risks have been successfully tackled. So, leadership is about, first of all, understanding what your vulnerabilities are, both within your particular business. And the successful businesses that lead well understand that very acutely. They have ways of measuring it both in terms of lagging indicators but also leading indicators. So they not only know what's happened and can learn from it, but they know the health of their leadership and management systems almost on a day-to-day basis. So if something doesn't look right, they can take action immediately to try and resolve the issue. But also more fundamentally, they understand that health and safety management isn't something that's separate and bolted on and somebody's job. It is part and parcel of the way in which you run a successful business, and it's just another risk along with financial, environmental, and so on and so forth, which you have to manage, because often the management principles behind it are exactly the same. It's not something that you just add on or bolt on, because that's just incredibly inefficient. So the construction industry, in particular, had a similar sort of seminal moment at the turn of the century with high rates of fatal accidents, and similar to you to some extent, they really had an impact on accident rates. And as Peter said earlier, it's now got to the point where most of them aren't happening on large complex sites, which is where they were. It's more on the small end of the market now, where the challenge for the industry actually sits. And similar to you as well, bearing down on conventional safety is one thing, but also you've got to keep an eye on those high consequence, low probability events as well, which the chemical industry came back to bite them, because they were very fixated on slips, trips and falls and conventional safety at the detriment of process safety risk. And that was what was behind the culture that had emerged in Buncefield to some extent, and actually happened at Texas City and all the other major accidents that occurred. So you need to balance the two, particularly in your industry, because you do have both. You have high consequence, low probability risks from use of explosives, rock ejection, slopes, but you've also got the more conventional things as well. So it is quite a particular challenge. But as I say, successful businesses see that as part and parcel of the business. It's a part of the integrated way in which they do things. They also heavily involve their workforce in solutions, identification, and actually solving the problems and making sure that the system operates in the way it should, engaging with their workforce on what the risks are, because often the workforce, and in particular that first tier of supervision, is absolutely critical, not only in understanding what's going on and what your risk profile looks like, but also in delivering proper management and control at the end of the day. Because leadership can be great, you can say all sorts of good things and commitment statements about how we're going to do things in our business, but if that doesn't percolate down right to the end, to the sharp end of the workforce, and often, as you will know, the light tiers of management are often a bit of an obstacle where messages get turned and changed and emphasised in slightly different ways. If you can't get that first line of supervision on the programme, then it doesn't matter how much leadership and commitment you've actually got, you've got to convince the workforce that it's the right thing to do. And again, successful businesses have that integrated culture where the workforce are part and parcel of the way in which risks are effectively managed.
Yeah, and certainly I know through Quinjat we've been doing a lot of work on trying to get the whole issue to do with genuine employee engagement into a meaningful space, to use one of your words, Miles, because it's something we all sort of emotionally agree with, but then actually recognising it and doing it better becomes quite a challenge. But one observation, I think, it goes back to Miles's point earlier on about the big beasts and the presences and the colleagues, and clearly, having seen the industry change quite significantly over the last 15 years, and also having looked at the numbers in some detail behind the sector performance, it's clear that we're flatlining. We haven't achieved zero, we're far from it, and actually we're in danger of getting worse, not better, and that clearly means there's a problem. And it isn't just the minor companies, not just the SMEs in our sector, it's the majors as well. And I wonder, there are one or two notable exceptions, and I'm not going to mention Cemex again, but clearly there is a need for clearer leadership within quarrying industry, I believe, I'm outside it now, to actually create stronger leadership on health and safety, because I think we've gone through a massive amount of improvement, but now we're seeing a plateauing. And it's you guys and girls who will be at the front end of that and having to face up to some of the problems that's going to occur. Miles.
If I can just offer a few comments from the Institute of Quarrying, really, which is highly relevant in this space. So as a professional institute, we've had a range of discussions, and we are acutely aware that there is a skill building requirement across all employees, whatever the job or grade or the life experience is in this space, and exactly the way that Colin is describing, because doing more of the same gives you the same output, and then pointing at someone and going, be safer, doesn't generally give you a better outcome. In the same way, being more profitable, work a bit harder, sell a bit more. You don't necessarily get the response that you desire from these sorts of inputs. So as a professional institute, we're in a process now of building what we call a skill wheel, because it's around, frankly. But really, because to look at how we can offer capacity building and frankly skill building at different parts of people's life journey. And for those of you who are aware, we've done a lot of work at the supervisor end with University of Derby and some others over a really long period of time, and developed some fantastically skilled people who have gone on to some great jobs. But what we probably haven't done is done much with them since, so when they've gone into managerial positions, and frankly we've done almost nothing at the leadership level. And if you suddenly become a natural born leader, I think you're really lucky, and you're probably amongst the minority. But expecting leadership in the things that we're talking about here, in fact, just take safety and supply of materials to a complicated world. Forget everything else. Just those two things. Just to expect leaders in this space to step up and deliver with no intervention and no capacity building is crazy, isn't it? So, as a professional institute, we've got to step up into that space to help you, the professionals, to deliver better outcomes. So watch this space, it is coming, and we all deserve that, otherwise we will just get the same results that we've been talking about on the panel here.
Any follow-up questions from the challenges we've set out for the performance of the industry as a whole? Perhaps you not wishing to stick your head above the parapet means that's part of the problem, to be honest.
Colin, do you mind if I again?
Yes, Anthony. Can you just explain who you are and who you represent, please? Right, down the front here, Laura.
For Colin's benefit, Anthony Morgan, IOQ. The vast majority of the responses that we've had are around how the key issues are being dealt with by the industry. But my question is maybe linking back to the Institute itself. Although Miles covered some of the issues, throw it out to the floor and maybe to the panel. What is it that people believe that the Institute ought to be doing itself to sort of move these key issues forward?
I think there's quite a few members of the Institute in the room of varying grades. Again, part of the problem maybe. You can't all be that shy and retiring. I'm sure you're not when you get back to your sites. Yes, sir.
I'm Julian from Breeden Aggregates. I'm just concerned really about lack of diversity in the industry that I think we touched on earlier. In my quarry, I think we got about 20% of the workforce due to retire shortly. Been interviewing for a couple of positions recently, and I had absolutely no women, ethnic minorities at all. I just wondered what the IOQ could do to help out in that respect, really.
There, you got a question back now. What can the Institute of Quarrying do? So we said, what can the Institute of Quarrying do back? I mean, without an Institute of Quarrying hat on, if I may, and then we'll come to Alan here. I've always believed, and I was in your position a couple of decades ago as a quarry manager. Alan knows, we worked at the same quarry, and I always maintained you got the quality of workforce you deserved as a manager. You had the as we used to call it, industrial relations, employee engagement. You had the industrial relations you deserved as well. Now, clearly you can't change something overnight, and you can't suddenly become what was the wording on? Employer of choice or whatever the wording was. That doesn't happen overnight, but it's a great place to aim for, and that means moving towards world-class operating environments, health and safety records, environmental compliance, and word will get out that you are a good place to work. Now, I know it doesn't happen overnight, and most quarry managers don't stay there for 20, 30 years, which is a different problem again. But that should surely be the responsibility of the people running the site to make sure it's the obvious place people want to work in the communities. That would be my glib answer, because they're not going to really think about going and work in a quarry if they could go and work in a call centre. We all think they're wrong, which is why we work in the industry, but they all think they're right and they wouldn't want to work in a quarry because they don't know or don't think about it. But actually, we could possibly offer a job for life for decent people, and they're never going to get that in a call centre, and they haven't really made the link. So I'm afraid I say, I'm not sure what the Institute Quarrying can do apart from give you the skills and make sure you've got the training through University of Derby and other courses to make sure you create something trending towards a world-class employment environment.
Colin, obviously I can't speak for the Institute and I wouldn't want to, but you just said a very interesting thing. I wonder how much we tell people what we do, because, are the opportunities that are available in our companies known? Are they known? I've been focusing a lot on young people and inspiring young people, and I think we've got to do a lot of that. And a lot of that is about showing them the opportunities and showing them what they could be doing in our industry. But it's not just about young people. If we're looking to get more people into our industry, yes, we've got to get the conditions right. Yes, we've got to make it a good place to work. But we've got to tell them what it's all about. And if we don't, and that's down to us. We're the people that can tell, because we love this industry. I imagine everybody in this room does. What is it that you like about this industry? And try and bottle that up and tell other people about it.
I think Alan Connolly wanted to make a point. Nora, all the microphone's behind you, Alan, don't worry. Cut out the middle person.
Alan Connolly, retired quarry manager. I think one of the major things that I've learned with the Institute and the industry, it's very difficult to get change. Because I think everybody, human nature sets in, and they don't want to change things because we think we're doing everything well. If I go back 12 years, I was at this venue giving a talk. The first speaker just pinched part of his speech 12 years ago. You must have got the old Institute book because it was in there. Why we don't employ women in the industry, ethnic minorities. So that's an example to use. 12 years ago, where I was worried sick of your position, that I'd make a mistake and get one letter wrong and the press get hold of it. But had that discussion, and the industry on them topics weren't able to change. They did change the industry a great deal. From the health and safety point of view, we used to work ridiculous hours, 80, 90 hours a week. All the industry has seen the benefit from shortening the working week down. So we do change, but we don't change everything. And the reason I'm saying it is, I act as a volunteer at the local gym. And one of the volunteers rang us up and says, Alan, I've got a bit of a problem here. You're the guy that might be able to sort it out. I've got a young lady here that wants to know how she can get a job in the quarrying industry, but she doesn't know how to go about it. And I thought, isn't that sad? I took my Quarry Institute book up, I took it to her, explained what you had to do. And we think we do a good job, or I did. I thought getting school kids into school. But there's somebody in my own village that didn't know how to get into the quarrying industry. And how many more individuals have we got out there? If you don't know an area like mine, where there's a lot of quarries in a very small area, if you don't know how to get in, how are we going to do what the panel's suggesting?
I mean, I thought there, it links with the two questions, really, or two statements about employment locally. Building on what I said earlier on, we used to be fairly shy. No, a long time ago, in the age of the quarry master and the getting your 6 bob on a Sunday morning and tapping your, forelock, we were confident as quarry operators because we ran quarrying villages. A lot of places did. Don't know if you other guys know that, but it was, you know. And if you were a large factory somewhere, you were the employer. And then we got a bit shy. And certainly when I joined the industry, we were shy. We kept our heads down, didn't we? And I think we've slowly been coming out of that as quarry operators, as people who work in quarries or in related factories. But I don't think we yet do enough, as you both saying, to promote ourselves and our sites. Forget the name of the company. If the company culture's good, great, use that. But actually a quarry is there for a long, long time, generally, even sand and gravel quarries. And often the names change on the front door. You know, so build a culture up that relates to you being an employer in a community, because you're a neighbour for so long. We've got so much better, but we haven't quite broken out, would be my observation, so the people in the village do know. So everybody in that village should have known you were the quarry manager. Or everybody in my village should know, you know, I can get access to materials or whatever. And I think a long time ago it would have happened, and we got out the habit of it and kept our heads down, and somehow we're not confident enough. That'd be my observation.
I mean, I can tell you about the fight that we have trying to get people come into our industry, and it's a real battle. And we've done quite a lot of research on it. Two things. We've got they call it the Y generation, I call it the McDonald's generation, which is basically they want to sit in front of computers and earn millions before they've hit 21. And they're much more into building, you know, Black Ops and Minecraft, which most of us in this room probably don't even know what it is. These are computer games. That's what they're into. So that's who we're battling. And so the way we've tried to go is towards BIM, advanced engineering, trying to show some of our youngsters that actually we do some really exciting stuff. Arabs don't compete or struggle to bring graduates and young into their business because they're building the Taj and bridges, and you know they're very good at marketing in all the universities. If there's a big building going up, they're involved in it, and then everyone wants to work for them. Work for Barrett's, everyone just thinks you're going to be a bricklayer or a plumber. That's basically what, you know, if I'm at a dinner party and I say, I work for Barrett's, they say, oh, you're a bricklayer. So funnily enough, I was, but that's not the point. So, but the point is, you know, that's the sort of relationship that a lot of the guys see. You've just got to know who you're fighting with, and you're fighting with a generation that does everything on a computer or a phone. You know, and so therefore our industry has to update itself and you know, develop apps, and I mean you were touching on it, and that's our new battleground. How do we gamify building? How do we get these youngsters involved? So that's something that we do. So.
Can I? Yeah, I do know what Minecraft is, and call it a game, I think, is rather overstating it. We are currently trying to get something together at the moment. A few years back, I came across a bit of software from Australia called Ollie's Island, which is about finding resources, using resources, building something, you know, which kids can relate to. What we're trying to do at the moment is to build that into a 3D space. There's a spin-off company at Nottingham, and they have a 3D space which they use for alerting new people in your sector, actually, to the dangers in a quarry. What we're trying to do now is to get somebody to rewrite the software so that we can immerse children, if you're allowed to use that word, in the space, and you know, make them play games in our sector. Quite a challenge, I suppose, but that's why you pay these game designers quite lots of money, I suppose. But this will be directed at you know, sub-teams, 9, 10, to get them interested in what we do, and to try and make them realise, one, it can be quite fun, and two, it's very important. And I think we do need to catch them at that age, because once they get down the path, they leave us behind. And I think that's a very important step. And the second bit I'd like to make is resistant to change. I was involved in a project 10 years ago about landfill. We'd come up with a great system for improving landfill design and construction, which was cheaper, technically better, and environmentally much better. And the Environment Agency were on board. Everything was singing. I went to see the landfill director of an important company, and my meeting with him lasted precisely 4 minutes. He looked at me, sat me down, and said, "If you think you're here to actually carry out trials on one of my cells, let me tell you, it's not going to happen." So the mistake we'd made was not engaging at the highest level in that particular company and getting them on board in the first off. We thought we'd done that. But it does go to show that, technical people, relatively, straightforward. If it's good, you'll get them on board. But when it comes to getting to the top of the tree, there's a view that his job, quite reasonably, is to landfill a certain amount of material and make a certain amount of profit. He did that last year, he'll do it this year, and he's quite comfortable to do it next year. And that's the end of it.
Yes, sir. Down here, Laura. Forgot where the microphone is now. Okay.
Phil Lewis from Finning. Oliver, you raised a good point about like these new technologies and getting people excited, the PlayStation generation. A lot of these changes are starting to creep through, but the problem is, as I think the point you made there, it's people see them as optional and nice to-dos. But, a lot of these new technologies, things like, using GPS precision, whether it's, laser for civil engineering, machines being easier to control with joysticks now rather than lots of levers, it's there to appeal to that younger blood and get people excited. I guess from a policy point of view or from a governmental point of view, when you look across Europe, there's a lot of other countries that are probably adopting that technology a lot more than the UK is. Yep. And they're benefiting from probably reduced spend on a project, get it completed on time quicker. Is there any movement in government to almost try and accelerate the usage of these technologies, knowing that you're going to drive efficiency, you're going to probably get the job done more cost effectively, but also probably it's going to be a bit more sexy for those younger guys coming into the industry, or girls, and they're going to want to start using those technologies. So I don't know who that's aimed at, but...
Well, I'm sure we can all contribute to that, but let me start by saying you're absolutely right, because we're seeing a lot of that in continental Europe. I interface quite a lot with Bouygues, with Vinci. Some of the stuff they're doing is way ahead. Skanska as well is way ahead of some of our UK companies. And why are they doing it? Not because their governments are telling them to do it, because it's good for their bottom line. Which leads me to the next point, because sadly I think the answer to your last question is no. I don't think government is going to incentivise it, because I think government is expecting industry to want to do it because it's good for their bottom line.
I mean, just to give you an example, if you go to the next slide, press down. No.
Press down or something.
Just to give you an example, so sadly you can't see that, but just to give you, no, don't move, but just to give you an example, we're really interested in piling because we have real problems with ground and foundations, and we're really interested in new technology, and I realise Caterpillar are sponsoring, so apologies now.
It's the wrong colour.
So, and that is a 40-ton thing that we have to order. It takes a few days to come down the road and gets delivered to our site. And that is a HIAB that can do the exact same job at 10 ton and uses a single skilled person that usually drives that around my site anyway. That saves me a ton of money. And basically that component there just clicks off like a Swiss Army knife, and I stick it on a site. And what it means is, it's not just about the jobs I create on site and the difference. Actually, when I walked into JCB, apologies to Caterpillar, you will see there's about 400 very young designers sat in a room designing these pieces of equipment. So whilst I may not be employing them directly into driving it, I'm definitely employing them into making it, and the guys in the factory. So I think that there is a lot of innovation that we can do, and that's I had that one because it's the only one I've got that we do in the ground. So which is to help sort of tiling and stuff like that. So I think there are some great advancements in this sector. It's just getting them out and getting that partnership. Apologies.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. Oh, there's me else now.
That's it again.
I've got the general short. Don't worry, leave it there. I'm conscious of the time, and we do need to start to wrap things up, but I think Miles wanted to make one further point, I believe, if you could.
So something that's striking when you listen to the characteristic of the industry through the conversation that we're having, and something I've noticed having left the sector directly and joined something else that's still in the construction industry but is adjacent, is the culture of the sector becomes much more apparent, and that culture is driven by a bunch of leaders, and they're what they think is good, whoever they are, and how they behave and are seen to behave, and what makes them visibly seem happy and sad, casts a really big shadow, good or bad, over the organisation beneath them. So some of the things that we see going on and some of the state of mind that we have before us is a result of that, and that's not casting any ill of those individuals. It's just what happens. And I've gone into a different organisation that runs on a fundamentally different set of values, and I'll leave you with one example. So coming out of the sector, I think it's quite focused on itself, and we talked about R&D quite a lot, and R&D is one of the things that tends to happen, or did in the business I worked in like super top secret space where it was all code words and no one was allowed in certain meetings and all this sort of stuff. Now I work for an organisation that just does research for a living, and it's open, collaborative, in the market. And the whole attitude is, I don't know how to fix that, let's find somebody who does. And the fastest way to do that is to literally ask every human being I can find, which is a completely different mentality to one that says, I'm in charge, I know how to fix this, let's go forward. So I'm generalising a bit here, but it is something I've noticed. It's much more apparent when you step out and look back than it is when you're within. So I think there is a big dollop, if you like, of collaboration that needs to enter the sector, because it is part of a bigger machine. And there's a very, very big difference between recognising your importance and understanding your contribution. They're not the same at all. They really aren't. And it's worth going away and think about that when you have a beer later. Not the same. Understanding your contribution, recognising your importance. We do a lot of recognising of importance and not much of understanding contribution. And they're subtly different, but lead to very different behavioural outcomes.
Okay, I'm getting a red flashing light up here. It's not the Trade Union Congress, but sooner or later somebody's going to cut off the mic. A lot of these people haven't got a clue what the Trade Union Congress is, have they? Miles, as ever, thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that. In MIRO, we're all good talkers. Give me the floor and I'll bore you to death all afternoon. But listening is far more important. Listening to everybody, distilling out of it what's required. There are a whole host of societal, technical, and economic challenges facing the sector that need to be addressed over the term. And the only way that's going to happen is if the people who are actually involved in it come out and say, this is what we individually or we collectively feel is important, and we need to get them addressed. Now, there are funds available for this. In the European regime, I never thought in my life I'd say this. It's improved out of all recognition. Brussels is that you can actually talk to Brussels now. It's amazing, and it's less bureaucratic. Industry now is funded to 100% rather than 50%. It's still not a gravy train, but the opportunities are there. The only downside is we have to work hard to shape the agenda that they come up with. There's still not enough industry directing what they do. And secondly, it is a somewhat time-consuming process. It can take over a year to go from a concept to a funded project. But it's something which we, the Institute of Quarrying, and yourselves should get involved in. Other companies in continental Europe they're very immersed in this, and they are benefiting. And do we want them to benefit at the UK's expense?
Okay, thank you, Alan. Peter, would you like to
all I want to say is it appears to me that a lot of the planets are aligning right now. And I think we've got to grasp the opportunity that creates. I see this as quite an exciting time. and I'm sure we'll all benefit from it.
Okay, Peter, again, anything you'd like to just...
I think just echoes what others have said. I mean, I talk quite a bit about, the quarries industry. You're not really. You're a mixture of people who do broadly similar things, but you've got large companies, you've got small businesses. There's a number of businesses aren't even represented here. One of the things the chemical industry picked up on very early is that their reputation and how they're viewed and how they operate in national, international markets, they're only as good as their weakest link. And if one has a major accident, then it really does impact directly on the rest of the business. So I think you need a plan. You need a plan as to how you're going to respond to the challenges of the government agenda. And as a subset of that, again, is got to be that sort of health and safety risk management component. You have an advantage, though, over the rest of the construction sector in that you are relatively small. And you probably know nearly everybody who works at a leadership level in the industry. So I think you're in a very strong position to work collaboratively and really set out some very clear aspirations for the short, medium and long term about how you're going to meet all the challenges which we've been talking about today.
Thank you, Peter. Oliver, do you have any final comments?
I mean, just very quickly, as Barrett's, we're trying to lead construction, so the doors are always open and all innovation welcome. So you've had my contact details, no doubt, and I have people that have been mowing the lawn on Sunday and decided to pop in on a Monday to tell me about their great innovations, and I have multi-million-pound businesses across the world come and tell me the innovations. I'll let you guess who usually has the better ideas. So, thank you.
Okay, I think I'm going to ask Anthony up in a second to finish the session, but from my point of view, I can't thank the contributors enough. Thank you, those of you who contributed from the floor as well. I think we've been privileged to hear Sir Peter's final presentation. I know you doesn't like being called Sir Peter.
Well, that's because I'm not.
Are you? Right.
Or at least I don't know about it anyway.
Haven't you heard yet? I'm sorry, you heard it from me first. All right, sorry. My notes were wrong. There you go. We won't know what to call you when you're on I'm a Celebrity next year. Yeah. 4 tips, just to paraphrase Miles. Embrace the digital, collaborate, innovate, and be accountable. And in terms of getting Peter's title wrong, any title, I'm wrong, so I'll take that on the nose. Thank you very much, and I'd like to ask Anthony, our President, to come up and finish the panel session.
Oh, first of all, I'd have to say how shocked I was to hear that Conference believes that the industry doesn't welcome perhaps ethnic minorities. I know loads of Welsh people working in the industry, to be honest. But in summing up today's programme, I'd firstly like to thank all of the speakers and the panellists for their participation in the event. Special thanks also go to Colin for his very able chairing of the panel session. I believe we witnessed some stimulating and lively debate which provided us with a diverse range of perspectives on the issues facing our industry today. I'm sure that these will help us all to develop our own future plans with a view to deciding how we can best contribute to the wider needs of the UK's construction sector. What I hope delegates have taken out of the day is a greater understanding of the role that innovative thinking and the development of people and their skills base play in building businesses that can grow and adapt to their employees and their customers' needs. These are themes that tomorrow's sessions will explore in more detail through the use of practical examples and case studies, demonstrating where best practice is already flourishing within the industry. I believe that the next steps from today's event will be to digest all of the key points made in the presentations, the question and answer forum, and the thought boards. And hopefully you've populated some of the thought boards with your comments. If you haven't, well, it's not too late to do that now. And these can be used to formulate policies and targets which can build into a framework for the whole industry to work together to achieve. As President, I will make sure that we take the agreed initiatives forward in discussion with industry leaders and ensure that the quarrying industry continues to develop as a successful part of the construction sector. In closing, I would like to thank you all for attending and participating in today's conference sessions. I look forward to seeing many of you here tomorrow for day 2 of the conference. I sincerely hope that you found it interesting and that we have provided you with some new insights and ideas to take back and embed in your own organisations. Now, before we finish, we've got the awards ceremony, which will be starting in about 5 minutes. We'll need to maybe clear the stage and get things prepared. The University of Derby have sponsored some drinks and canapes and the like. So if you can bear with us, stay put within the room, enjoy a bit of a networking session for the next 10 minutes, and we'll start again now shortly. Thank you.